right, today we're going to synchronize these carburetors on this 84 Magna. The first thing we're going to do is adjust the pilot screws. We're going to go ahead and turn them all the way in, and then we're going to turn them back out 2.5. And once we get that all set up so all four of them are the same, then we'll go ahead and we'll get ready to check the vacuum. So the first thing we'll do is pull out all the four Phillips head screws that are in the intake, and once we get those Phillips head screws out, we can go ahead and install the vacuum tees. Right? So those screws, those Phillips head screws, have little copper washers, and they're a one-time use. This keeps the Phillips head screws from causing a vacuum leak. So when we go ahead and put this thing back together later, I'll put in some new copper O-rings, and they'll smash down and prevent us from having any vacuum leaks. So now we got the tubes out, or the screws out rather, and we'll go ahead and put the tubes in. We'll get these tubes going, and then we'll hook the gauges to that. All right, now I've got all four vacuum tubes in. I'm going to go ahead and hook up the vacuum lines to those tubes. And then once I get that together, then I'll pull out my gauge set, and we'll go ahead and attach the vacuum lines to the gauge set. Right? So now I have it adjusted. If you notice, there's four knobs on the top, right below the vacuum gauges. If you want to try to make them as close to closed as you can, you want to see very little movement in those gauges. But if there is no movement, that means you've shut off the vacuum, right? So you want to just see the gauge oscillate just a little bit. So you can see I've got one of the carburetors is way out, and actually they're all out, but one of them is definitely way out. So we'll go ahead and start our adjustment. I've got a old carburetor tool that I use, and what I'm going to do is get up inside there. There's little 7mm screws inside there, and we're going to start adjusting them down, and we'll just keep going back and forth until we finally have them all straightened out. All right, so the next couple of minutes is basically just going to be me with this wrench going in there, turning the screw a little bit. Now on this particular bike, I couldn't do it while it was running, so I would go in and I would do a little adjustment. I'd crack the throttle a couple of times to make sure that it was sitting where it should be. I'd fire it up, see if I got how much closer I got. Once the gauges leveled out, then I'd go ahead and I'd shut it back off, and then I just keep going back and forth until I finally got them right. It's a whole lot easier if you can do this while the engine's running, but on this particular carb set, there's just no way to fish that tool up inside there. So you have to shut the bike off. One of the key things to remember though, is you can see that I'm just snapping the throttle a couple times before I start it. That's critical because even though you're adjusting it, you have to let it reset, right? Otherwise, when you start it up, it might be just a little bit higher, a little bit lower. So you want to see where it settles in. So, like I said, I'm just going to keep going back and forth and until I get it close. Then we'll go over to the other side and we'll work on that. Now I probably could have shortened this video up quite a bit, but I wanted you to see that this is no quick and easy task. When you have to do it with the engine not running, it's you can't. You're just guessing, right? Well, maybe a quarter turn, maybe an eighth turn. Do that, then you go too far. You got to come back. So, like I said, if you can do it while the engine's running, then it's extremely easy. You just fine tuning it. When you get real close, you crack the throttle a couple of times and make sure the needles all laying back where they should. If they do, great. If they don't, then you do a little bit smaller adjustment. But with this bike not running, you're just going under there. You're making a little bit of adjustment because you don't want to go too far with it. And as you can see now, I think I've got the one side of the motor pretty close. So we're going to go over to the other side of the engine. And on this side of the engine, it's very hard to get to those screws. So what I have to do is actually physically turn the throttle until I get it to a point where I can actually expose those 7mm screws. And then once I have them exposed, then I can get up there with my 7mm wrench and turn them one way or the other, right? But I can't do it at closed throttle because it's too hard to get up in there. So I'm still way off, and like I said, you know what, you're just going to sit here and watch me go back and forth just so I can show you that this isn't a quick, easy task on these V4s. The Interceptor is a little bit easier. I can get to the screws on the Interceptor, but the Magnas and the Sabres are much harder to do. So here I'm finally getting close, and but I overshot the one carburetor, so now I got to come back at it a little bit. Now I've also had to adjust the actual throttle screw a couple of times. If you heard the last little bit, you heard the idle was up a little bit high. Once I start getting these things adjusted in, that's going to change the engine RPM. So you're going to have to get a hold of that little black screw, bring it down between, I bring it to 1250 to 1500, and then go back at it and see what you do. So you're just going to keep, like I said, going back and forth, and you might have to adjust your idle knob a little bit to make sure that you're adjusting it in a good spot. Now, obviously, you can fast forward this video. I'm just trying to put a lot of it out there, just so you see that it's not that quick. But towards the end here, we'll put it all back together and I'll wrap it up. Okay, so now I've got them pretty much all even. Everything's good. We've finally got it all adjusted in. The last thing that I want to do is make sure that those needles are moving the way that they're supposed to be. So I'll do a quick adjustment on the gauges and make the needle shake a little bit and then come back so it's just barely shaking, and then that way I know that the gauge is actually reading properly, right? If you make the needle stop moving, then what happens is it's inaccurate. And if the needles are moving too much, then you can't really tell where you are. So you just keep playing with those adjustment screws at the bottom of the vacuum. Here's the tool I was using. It bends to any shape. I've got a tie wrap around it just to hold it in 95. So the last thing we're going to do is take the vacuum tees back out. We're going to put the Phillips head screws back in. I've got a bunch of brand new copper washers that I'm going to install under each one of these Phillips head screws. And so each intake manifold on each cylinder head has its own vacuum port. So we'll clog them back up, and with the new copper washers, we'll kind of assure ourselves that we don't have any vacuum leaks. All right, well, thanks for watching my video. If you could like and subscribe, I'd greatly appreciate that. I have two different playlists, one for my Crossfire Corvette and one for these V4. So hopefully there's something in there that will interest you. All right, thanks. Have a great day.